Okay, so Appalachia is home for me. I was born in Johnson City, Tennessee. So I've lived in Johnson City, lived in Jonesboro, and then Limestone, Tennessee, which is here
Yeah.
in Greene County. And currently, that's where my 91-year-old mother lives. So that was home for me. But my dad was a pastor. So in the 70s, I guess it was around 1977, he was sent to a church in Bristol. So he started pastoring there and then moved to Bristol in 77. And I've been in Bristol ever since. I went to college whenever I even worked as well. So I worked in telecommunications, did that for about 37 years. So I traveled all over the country. My clients were on the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest. Our corporate headquarters was in Kansas City, Missouri. So loved doing that. But whenever I retired in 2016, and I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I wanted to do community work. And then that kind of led to the history work that I'm doing because I wanted to learn about the history of the African American community in Bristol. Lived in Bristol most of my adult life, but I really didn't know a lot about that history. So I went to a couple of places trying to get some information so that I could learn more. And then I was told that we really don't have any archives or we don't have any of that history actually recorded. So that was the impetus
Hmm.
for the work. It's that can't be because I know there are African Americans within the community. There are older members of the community, been here all their life and would love to know more about that history. So I started spending time with some of the older members of the community, sitting on their front porch, letting them tell me stories of what it was like growing up in Bristol, where they went to school, what were some of the things that they did. And that just really one thing led to another. This was like really exciting for me. So I learned about an organization called Black in Appalachia. They were doing like these community history days and they were capturing history of the African American community. There was a community history day in Elizabethton. So I attended that. They did another community history day in Greenville, Tennessee. I met the director, William Isom, and asked him, could we do one of those in Bristol? So in 2019, I coordinated the very first Community History Day. It was at Slater School, which is the community center. And we had people who came in, they brought pictures, they brought newspaper clippings. We collected the very first oral stories. And whenever I think about that, what was most powerful for me was their connection to that school
Hmm.
because some of them attended during segregation.
Hmm.
That was their school. So they were walking around wanting to know, okay, this is where the band room was located. This was where my
Hmm.
teacher, so and this is where she was located. So they wanted to know what changes had been made to the actual building. But I felt that connection. And for many, I heard from them, nobody really asked us about our story. So
Yeah.
that was the most powerful thing for me. It's like giving them an opportunity to tell their story. What was it like growing up in Bristol during segregation, attending either Slater School on the Tennessee side, Douglas School on the Virginia side? So just really feeling the emotion and how connected those folks were with
Yeah.
their story, with the building. I think that was really the most powerful thing for me and really I think it really wanted me to dig a little deeper and learn more.
Hmm.
And the teachers, it was like family. I've heard multiple times in oral stories, it was like family. So there was that family connection. And then there were neighborhoods actually in Bristol. So that McDowell Street was an African American neighborhood. There was another neighborhood on the Bristol, Tennessee side. One was on Blackley Road, had a nickname Pig City, but there were like maybe 14, a dozen or more families that lived there, and they called that their village. I did an oral story with a lady who grew up there on Blackley Road. At the time, she had just turned 100. She now lives in Washington, D.C. But to hear her share her story, she talked about the village that she grew up in and how her parents built the home. Wonderful. The kids knew everybody in their neighborhood. They played together. They went to church together. They went to school together. The parents felt some responsibility for the children. So you could
Children that weren't their own.
Weren't their own.
Yeah.
Weren't their own. And they could get corrected by Miss So-and if they were doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And it was okay because that was how the village worked. But they did the day-to-day together. I would say that you would have more than three.
Yeah.
You had your pastor, you had your neighbor, you knew your neighbors, which is an interesting concept because sometimes I think we live in communities where we don't even know our neighbors. So it would have the more than three. I think, number one, they didn't know what they did not have. And I've heard that multiple times. We were poor and we didn't know it.
Yeah.
So they didn't know what they didn't have. There wasn't this comparison or this desire for something else. They didn't know. And then they had people who genuinely cared about them. Like when I hear about the teachers and how the teachers really cared about them. And then whenever they left Douglas or Slater and then they went to the other schools, that level of care was not there. It was like sink or swim. And some of them did struggle because we didn't know what we didn't have. We loved what we had. We had our friends. We had our families. We had our school. Now, they would go downtown and shop with the restrictions that were in place with Jim Crow. So they enjoyed that aspect, but for the most part, they stayed in the neighborhood because they knew that there were certain places that they couldn't go. So I just feel like that sense of care. And then it seemed that everyone felt some level of accountability for the other.
Find a way.